The wind had a strange way of howling through that empty town, like it remembered too much. It was near midnight when Sheriff Elias Boone heard it. Not the wind, but something else, softer, smaller, a sound that didn't belong in a place like this, a baby's cry. Elias had just blown out the lantern in his office, ready to finally rest his aching bones, when the sound came again. Faint, but clear. Not from the street, not from the alley, from the saloon, which made no sense. The painted lady hadn't served a drop of whiskey since the railroad bypassed Calico Ridge 3 winters back. Its windows were boarded, doors chained shut, ghosts left to drink in silence. Elias grabbed his coat, the old wool one with the frayed collar, and stepped out into the wind. Snow was falling sideways, thin and mean, biting through the gaps in his boots. He moved slow, like a man who'd spent 30 years chasing outlaws and burying friends, and had grown tired of both. The saloon door hung open, not broken, not forced, just open. Like someone had been there. Like someone wanted him to find it. And there, right at the threshold, nestled in a crate no bigger than a whiskey barrel, wrapped in an old quilt stitched with roses long faded, was a baby. He didn't cry when Elias approached. Just blinked up at him with the kind of eyes that felt older than they should be. Eyes that didn't ask for anything. Just waited. Elias stood there for a long while, not moving, not breathing. The last time he'd held something that small was his own son, decades ago, before fever took the boy, and grief took his wife not long after. He thought his heart had sealed itself shut after that. But now, under the frozen sky, something cracked, open again, just a little. "All right," Elias muttered, kneeling stiffly. "I don't know where you came from, or who thought this was the place to leave you, but you ain't staying out here." He lifted the crate, careful as if it were dynamite. The baby made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cry, just something human, something alive. And for the first time in years, Elias Boone, retired lawman, widower, shadow of a man, brought someone home. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to find the mother. Folks in towns like these had ways of disappearing, and sometimes you let sleeping devils lie. He just named the boy Jonah, like the one from the Bible, the one swallowed up and spat out again, still breathing, still with purpose. Only Elias didn't know then that 20 years later, that same boy would ride back into Calico Ridge, and with him, bring a storm that would tear open everything Elias thought he buried. But that night, it was just the snow, just a baby and a man too tired to wonder why. Fate had given him a second chance. Sometimes the wind brings more than cold. Sometimes, it carries someone you didn't know you were waiting for. If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment below, and don't forget to follow the next chapter, because Jonah's story is only just beginning. Elias Boone didn't speak much in those years after retirement, and Jonah spoke even less. The boy was quiet, in a way that didn't feel broken, just watchful, like he was always listening to something only he could hear. He grew up in that cabin just past the edge of town, where the prairie grass gave way to pine. It wasn't much, a one-room space with a stove that coughed more smoke than heat, and a roof Elias patched every spring with whatever wood the forest gave him. But it was home, and Jonah never asked for more. He didn't ask about his mother. Never once. Elias had waited, thinking the boy might grow curious, might ask why he didn't look like the sheriff, or why no one in town called Elias Pa. But he never did. Maybe he didn't need the answer. Maybe he already knew it. Some kids ask questions to understand the world. Jonah seemed to accept the world for what it was. Cold in the mornings, quiet in the evenings, and held together by small kindnesses that didn't need to be spoken out loud. Elias taught him how to hunt, how to read a trail, how to load a rifle slow and steady. But more than that, he taught the boy what silence could mean, how to sit on a porch and let the wind speak, how to read a man's heart by his hands, not his words. And in return, Jonah taught Elias something too, that maybe a man could live again after he'd given up on the idea. That family didn't have to be blood. Sometimes, it was just who stayed. But even with all that quiet peace, there were things Elias kept hidden, like the note he'd found tucked inside the crate that first night. Faded, nearly unreadable, just 5 words scrawled in a rushed hand. "Keep him safe. Please, Ruth." He'd never told Jonah about it. Didn't know why, not really. Maybe he feared the name would mean something to the boy, or worse, that it wouldn't. Instead, he tucked it behind a loose board, under the floor, next to the badge he no longer wore, and the letters from his wife he still couldn't bring himself to burn. And so the years passed, slow as snow melting. On Pine, Jonah became a man, tall, lean, with the same kind of stillness Elias once saw in the best trackers. But there was a weight behind his eyes now, a question forming he didn't know how to ask. And then, just before his 20th winter, Jonah disappeared. No note, no fight, no goodbye. Just gone. Elias searched, God knows he did. Rode every trail, asked every face from here to the border, but no one had seen a young man with quiet eyes and a name borrowed from scripture. All Elias could do was come back home, light the lamp each night, and pray to a God he no longer trusted. Until, one morning, 20 years to the day, he found that crate at the saloon. A stranger rode into town. It was the kind of morning that didn't feel like much. Dust hung in the air like it hadn't moved all night. The sun stretched slow over the rooftops of Calico Ridge, painting gold onto worn shingles and broken signs. Chickens clucked behind the mercantile. The blacksmith hammered lazily at something that probably didn't need fixing. Elias Boone sat on the porch of his cabin, same as he had every morning for 20 years. Coffee gone cold in his hand. Rifle leaning against the wall. Eyes on the trail, out of habit more than hope. He wasn't waiting anymore. Not really, which is why he didn't stand when the figure came into view. Just a lone rider. Horsed, lean and tired, kicking up dust as he made his way down the main road. Nothing unusual. Folks passed through Calico Ridge now and then. Bounty men, deserters, dreamers with maps drawn in ink and lies. But this one didn't ride. Past he slowed, dismounted, and walked straight into the saloon. That was the first thing that made Elias rise. The second was the way the man moved, quiet but certain, like he knew the town, not from stories, but from memory. Like the saloon wasn't just some abandoned ruin, but something else entirely. Elias put on his coat, slow and stiff. Took the rifle, not out of suspicion, but instinct. An old lawman never walks into a question empty-handed. The saloon looked the same as the day it closed, save for the dust that clung to every surface like time had forgotten how to sweep. The man stood at the bar, not drinking, just standing. Back to the door. Hat low, shoulders wide but worn. Elias stepped in and cleared his throat. The man turned, and in an instant, Elias forgot how to breathe, because there, under that wide-brimmed hat, were eyes he'd only seen in the mirror, not his own. Jonah's same steady look, same quiet storm behind them, but older now, sharper, like they'd seen too much, and buried more. Elias gripped the edge of the doorframe. "Jonah?" he asked, not believing it even as he said it. The man didn't answer. Not right away. He just looked around the room, like memory had swallowed him whole. Then, finally, his voice low, rough from time and distance. "I didn't know if you'd still be here." Elias took a step forward. "I never left." A pause. "I had to go," Jonah said. "I needed answers." Elias's jaw tightened. "Did you find them?" Another silence. And then Jonah looked straight at him, eyes dark with something deeper than hurt. "Not all of them," he said. "One's still buried right here." He tapped the bar with a gloved hand. Right where the crate once sat. Right where his story began. The silence in the saloon pressed thick between them. Dust floated in slants of light from the broken windows, like time itself was trying to speak, but neither Elias nor Jonah rushed to fill the quiet. Elias stepped closer, studying the man in front of him like he was both stranger and ghost. "You look like your mother," Elias said finally, voice low. Jonah didn't blink. "You knew her?" That stopped Elias cold. He hadn't meant to say that. Hadn't meant to bring her up. But the name Ruthit had sat heavy in his chest for 2 decades. Unspoken, unanswered. He nodded, slow. Only from one note. Jonah raised an eyebrow. "What note?" Elias hesitated. He wasn't proud of hiding it. Wasn't proud of how many times he'd stood over that floorboard, fingers twitching, and still hadn't brought it up. "She left a message the night I found you," Elias said, tucked in with a blanket. 5 words. "Keep him safe. Please, Ruth." Jonah's expression didn't shift, but something in his shoulders dropped. Not relief, exactly. More like confirmation of something long suspected. A thread, finally pulled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elias looked down at the scarred bar top. "Because I was afraid you'd want to find her, and you didn't want to lose me." The words weren't angry. Just true. Elias nodded once. Honest, heavy. "I'd already lost too much." Jonah walked to the window, looked out at the street like it might offer answers. It didn't. "Found a woman in Tucson," he said, older, ran a church home. She told me about a girl named Ruth, who showed up pregnant and scared, stayed a while, then vanished. He paused. She said Ruth didn't trust anyone, but she loved that baby more than life itself. Elias swallowed hard. She must have been desperate to leave you like that. She left me with you, Jonah said quietly. Maybe that was the best thing she ever did. The words hit Elias deeper than he expected. He cleared his throat, voice rough. You still looking for her? Jonah turned to face him fully. I was, he said. But now I think I came back to find you. Elias didn't know what to say to that. His hands, weathered and strong, gripped the edge of the bar like a man trying not to fall into the past, into grief, into the aching truth that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't failed. Jonah walked over, glanced down at the bar again. This is where you found me? He asked. Elias nodded. I come here sometimes, Jonah admitted. In my head wondered what it looked like. If you were scared. I was, Elias said softly. More scared than I'd ever been, with a gun pointed at me. They both chuckled, but it was a quiet, tired sound. The kind that follows years of weight finally shared. Then Jonah asked, You still have the note? Elias gave a slow nod, didn't say anything more. Just turned, walked out of the saloon, and led Jonah back down the road. Back home. To the cabin, where the floor creaked in all the same places, and the rocking chair still faced the trail. Inside, Elias knelt slowly, pried up the board, and pulled out the faded scrap of paper, brittle with time. He handed it to Jonah, like a sacred thing. Jonah took it in silence, read the 5 words, then folded it, held it to his chest. And for the first time in 20 years, Elias saw tears in the boy's eyes, not from sorrow, but from something else, something closer to peace. Sometimes, the things we hide aren't meant to stay hidden. They're just waiting for the right hands to hold them. If this part moved you, leave a thought in the comments. The note stayed folded on the small table by the fire. Jonah didn't put it away, didn't ask Elias if he could keep it. He just set it down gently, like it belonged there, like it always had. Elias didn't mind. In truth, seeing it again after all those years made him feel something strange, like closure and guilt all tangled into one. They sat in silence for a while. The old man and the boy who wasn't a boy anymore. The wind whispered outside like it remembered their names, brushing against the cabin like a ghost come home. Elias made coffee the way he always had, thick, bitter, and far too strong. Jonah drank it anyway. After a while, Elias spoke, his voice raspier than usual. You got family? Jonah shook his head. No, never stuck long enough anywhere. A pause. You, Elias looked into the fire, where embers popped and cracked like old bones. Had a wife once, long time ago. Buried her, before I hung up the badge. Never had children. Till that night at the saloon. Jonah nodded slowly, his gaze on the flames. You think she's still out there? He asked. Elias didn't need to ask who. I don't know, he said truthfully. But if she is, and if she could see the man you became, I think she'd sleep easy tonight. That pulled the edge of a smile from Jonah, faint but real. The kind of smile you don't give freely, only to someone who's earned it. They didn't speak again until the fire burned low. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the pines, Elias caught Jonah standing alone outside, staring toward the north ridge. Just standing, hands in his coat pockets, jaw set like he was waiting for something he wasn't sure would come. You all right? Elias asked from the porch. Jonah didn't answer right away. Then, there's something I should have told you. Elias stepped down the creaky steps, his boots crunching frost. I didn't just come back to see you, Jonah said. I came because someone else sent me. Elias stiffened, just slightly. Jonah turned, then eyes darker now, in the fading light. She said her name was Ruth. The name hit like a shot through the fog. Elias felt his chest tighten. She's alive. Jonah nodded. She's sick. Been for a while. Didn't have much time left when I found her. But she knew who I was the moment she saw me, said she. Prayed every night that you'd raised me right. He swallowed hard. Then she handed me something. Told me to bring it to you. Told me to tell you. Thank you. Jonah reached into his coat, then pulled something wrapped in an old handkerchief. He unfolded it slow. Inside was a locket. Tarnished gold, heart-shaped, the kind you'd wear close to the chest. He opened it. Inside were 2 things. A tiny faded photo, Ruth, young and scared but smiling, and on the other side, a pressed daisy. Elias stared at it like it had come from another world. His hands trembled when he took it. I remember this, he whispered. She wore it the night she testified. Right before I helped her disappear. Jonah's eyes narrowed. Testified. Elias nodded. She wasn't just any runaway girl. She was a witness in a murder trial. Dangerous man. High up in a mining cartel. They would have killed her. I helped her get out. Helped her vanish. I never saw her again. The pieces clicked into place now. The fear in her note. The secrecy. The silence. And suddenly, Jonah's return wasn't just a homecoming. It was the final chapter of something much older than either of them had admitted. The fire burned low again, and neither man moved to feed it. Elias sat with the locket cradled in both hands like it might disappear if he blinked. He turned it over once, twice, as if the weight of 20 years might spill out through the tiny clasp. Jonah hadn't said anything in a while. He just watched Elias quietly, letting the silence work like salve on old wounds. Finally, Elias looked up. Where is she now? Jonah's jaw tightened. Gone. The word landed soft but heavy, like snow falling on a coffin. She passed 6 months ago, Jonah said. But before she did, she gave me something else. Said it was meant for you, but she couldn't bring herself to send it back then. From the same coat pocket, he pulled a worn envelope, edges browned with time. It had Elias's name on it, not Sheriff, not Mr. Boone, just Elias. Jonah held it out. She wrote it the night she left you. Elias took it like it might shatter in his hands. He stared at the handwriting for a long moment. Loopy and feminine, still strong. Despite the years, he opened it slowly. The paper inside had yellowed, creased in 3 neat folds. His eyes scanned it slowly, lips moving with the words, though no sound came. Jonah sat in silence, watching. Then Elias read aloud, voice rough and careful. Elias, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say goodbye the way I wanted. There was no safe way. Not with the men looking for me. Not with what I'd seen. But I need you to know, I didn't leave out of fear. I left to save him. I saw the way you held him that first night, like he was already yours. I saw the way your hands shook when he cried, and the way your eyes softened when he stopped. You were the first person who looked at him like he was more than trouble. That's why I chose you. If you stayed, if you raised him, thank you. If you didn't, I still don't blame you. But I hope, with everything in me, that you did. And I hope, one day, he finds his way back to you. Tell him, I loved him always. And tell yourself this, you saved 2 lives that night. Maybe 3. Ruth. The silence after the letter felt different. Not empty, but full. With memory, with understanding, with forgiveness that had taken too long to arrive. Jonah looked away, blinking hard. Elias folded the letter gently, pressing it to his chest. He didn't speak for a while. Just sat there, tears lining his eyes but never quite falling. When he did speak, it was barely more than a whisper. She was brave, he said. Jonah nodded. She never talked about the past, but the night she gave me that letter, she said your name like it still meant something. Elias smiled then, a small, sad, thankful kind of smile. She never stopped being part of my life, he said. Not for a day. Jonah leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know, I didn't just come back for her. Elias looked at him. I came because I don't know who I'm supposed to be now, Jonah admitted. She's gone, and I spent so many years looking back, I forgot how to live forward. Elias let that hang in the air. Then he said, well, we can figure that out together, if you want. Jonah didn't answer, but he didn't need to, just nodded once, and looked into the fire. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone in the room. The next morning came cold and gray, with a sky the color of old tin. Elias woke early, old habits, and found Jonah already outside, splitting wood with his coat off, and steam rising from his back like he was trying to outwork the ghosts. Elias watched for a moment from the porch. The rhythm of the axe was steady, almost too steady, like a man trying to keep thoughts from getting in. You always up before sunrise? Elias asked. Jonah paused, wiped his brow. Comes with being hunted. That pulled Elias upright. You want to explain that? Jonah set the axe down, eyes still on the woodpile. When Ruth passed, she left more than a letter. She told me who my father was, said he was a bad man, and that she'd been running from him since before I was born. Elias nodded slowly, jaw tightening. I always figured she wasn't just scared of strangers. She said he had money, reached friends in places they shouldn't be. I thought that all ended when she died. But someone's been following me since Tucson. 2 men, don't say much. Just show up where I stop. Elias felt the cold settle, in deeper than the wind. You think they followed you here? I know they did, Jonah said. Saw their horses last night. Out by the tree line. Elias said nothing for a moment. Then he turned, went back inside, and returned with an old rifle in hand, oiled, cleaned, and worn from years of keeping peace. Jonah looked at him, startled. You think we're gonna have to fight? Elias shook his head. I think we need to make it clear we're not the ones running anymore. They didn't say much after that. Just went about the day quietly, chopping wood, feeding the horses, fixing a loose shutter. All the while, the woods felt thick with eyes. At sundown, the first man stepped out of the trees. He wasn't young, scar on the left cheek, thin mustache, walked with the easy swagger of someone who'd drawn guns for pay more than once. The second man stayed in the shadows. Elias didn't bother reaching for the rifle. He just stepped off the porch with steady steps. You lost? He asked. The man smiled thin. Just looking for someone. Elias glanced at Jonah, who hadn't moved from the porch steps. Looks like you found him. Name's Jonah, ain't it? Jonah stood, slowly. Depends on who's asking. The man tilted his head. Your daddy's been wondering where you went. Thought maybe you forgot where you came from. Elias stepped in then. Firm. He didn't forget. He chose to leave. The man's smile faded. You the one took him in. Raised him like a pup you found in the road. I'm the one who taught him how to stand his ground. Elias said calmly. There was a moment of tension, like the air itself stopped breathing. Then the second man emerged, younger, rifle across his back. Not a word from him. Just eyes watching. We ain't here to make trouble, the older one said. Just deliver a message. Jonah crossed his arms. Go on then. Your daddy says you got something that belongs to him. Jonah's eyes narrowed. What would that be? His name? There was silence after that. Then Jonah said, without blinking, he can keep it. The older man smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. He tipped his hat. We'll be around. Just in case you change your mind. They turned and walked off. Like they'd done their job just by showing up. Elias didn't speak for a long while after they vanished into the trees. When he finally did, it was quiet. You don't owe that man anything. Jonah exhaled. Doesn't mean he won't try to take it. Elias nodded. Well, let him try. He placed a firm hand on Jonah's shoulder. This is your home now. And I ain't letting anyone drag you back into the dark. The wind picked up after sundown, rattling the shutters and whispering through the trees like ghosts that never left the hills. Elias double-checked the windows, then slid the bolt across the front door. Jonah sat near the hearth, one hand resting on his knee, the other wrapped around a cup of strong coffee he hadn't touched in an hour. You think they'll come tonight? He asked quietly. Elias didn't look up from the lamp he was trimming. Men like that don't make long trips to deliver messages. They come to collect. Jonah swallowed. You don't have to get involved in this. I brought it here. Elias looked over. I'm already involved. Been involved since the night I found you wrapped in a blanket on a saloon porch. Jonah didn't answer, but he nodded. And in that small gesture, there was something like peace. They sat in silence for a while, just the fire crackling. Then, the sound changed. Not wind. Not wood settling. Footsteps, slow, purposeful. Elias moved to the door, rifle in hand but lowered. Stay back, he said gently. A knock came, not rushed, but sharp. Elias opened the door halfway, lantern raised. The older man from the woods stood on the porch, alone this time. Hat off. No smirk on his face tonight. Evening, Sheriff. Elias didn't correct him. You come to talk again? Elias asked. Not exactly, the man said. Got a wire this morning. Boy's daddy's in town. Got himself a U.S. Marshal badge now, if you can believe that. Says he wants his son, or what's left of him. Elias raised a brow. Since when do lawmen send bounty hunters? The man shrugged. Guess old habits die hard. Said he'd be riding out at first light, with or without cooperation. Behind Elias, Jonah appeared in the hallway, quiet as a ghost. The man looked at him. He's waiting, Jonah. Big ranch outside Flagstaff. You could be living high, instead of playing house with a man who ain't your kin. Jonah stepped forward. You know what I remember from growing up, he said. Running. Always. Running. Always waiting for the next knock on the door. The next lie. The next bruise. And the only peace I ever knew was the moment I got left behind. The man blinked, as if surprised to hear the fire in Jonah's voice. I'd rather shovel dirt in this valley till my back gives out. Jonah continued, than ride with a man who only wants me because he lost control. Elias looked at the man. That's the last time you knock on this door. The man didn't argue, didn't threaten, just looked at Jonah for a long time, then said, "You sound a lot like your mama." Then he turned, stepped off the porch, and disappeared into the wind. Elias closed the door, bolted it, and for the first time that night, Jonah let out a breath like he'd been holding it for 20 years. They didn't speak for a while. No need. The fire was enough. Later, when the wind died down and the cabin settled into sleep, Elias stood outside, watching the stars, one hand resting on the railing. Jonah joined him. "You think he'll really come?" Jonah asked. Elias didn't answer right away. Then he said, "If he does, we'll deal with him." Jonah looked up at the stars. "You ever wish you'd had a son?" Elias smiled softly. "Every day." There was a long pause. Then Jonah said, almost in a whisper, "Maybe you did." Elias didn't speak. He just reached over, squeezed Jonah's shoulder, and for the first time in a long, long while, Jonah didn't feel like a lost boy anymore. The morning broke with a cold stillness, the kind that makes every sound feel louder than it is. Snow had dusted the tops of the fence posts overnight, and the sun climbed slow behind the mountains, casting gold across the frost. Elias stood outside saddling his horse. Jonah stood beside him, hands tucked under his coat, eyes on the road, like he could already see what waited at the end of it. "You sure about this?" Elias asked. Jonah nodded. "He's not gonna stop, Elias. If I don't face him now, I'll be looking over my shoulder the rest of my life. And I'm done running." Elias handed him the reins. "Then we ride together." They rode into town. As the church bell struck 7, folks turned to look, not because of Elias, but because they recognized something in Jonah's face. Not fear, not anger, just quiet resolve. The marshal was waiting outside the telegraph office. Jonah knew him instantly. He was older now, grayer, heavier around the middle, but the eyes were the same. Sharp, cold, calculating. "Thought I might have to drag you out of that cabin," the man said. "You dragged me enough when I was small," Jonah replied. The man chuckled. "You get your mother's mouth. Shame she didn't live long enough to teach you when to keep it shut." Elias stepped forward. "That's enough." The man turned, looked Elias up and down. "You, the one been filling the boy's head with soft notions about family and honor. I'm the one who taught him what a man is." The man laughed again, meaner this time. "I got law behind me now. Badge says I can take him." Jonah took a step forward. "Take me where? You gonna teach me how to break horses and beat children? Or maybe just leave me with your new wife to finish what you started with my mother?" The street went quiet. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing. "You watch your mouth," the man hissed. "I watched long enough," Jonah said. "Watched you lie. Watched you make her hide. Watched her die alone because she was too scared you'd find her." The marshal's hand hovered near his belt. But Elias didn't move for his gun. He simply said, "Draw if you want. But you'll be facing both of us." And the truth. A long, dangerous moment passed. But the marshal didn't draw. He dropped his hand, spat in the dirt. "You ain't worth it," he muttered, stepping back. "You'll come crawl home one day." Jonah held his ground. "You'll be dead before that day comes." The man mounted his horse, turned and rode out of town without another word. Jonah stood there for a long time after the dust had settled. Elias finally said, "You all right?" Jonah nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." They rode home slow. No rush, just the kind of quiet you earn after something heavy is lifted. When they got back to the cabin, Jonah put the kettle on. Elias watched him move, less tension in his shoulders now. More peace in the way he carried himself. "You sure you don't want to leave?" Elias asked. "Start new somewhere." Jonah shook his head. "This is new. I'm not who I was when I got here. And you're the reason I remembered who I could be." They sat on the porch, watching the clouds drift low over the hills. "Guess I never asked," Jonah said after a while, "why you stayed all those years. After you retired, after the town changed." Elias thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "I guess I was waiting for something to matter again." Jonah nodded. "Well, I think we found it." The valley thawed slowly. That spring snow melted into soft mud along the cabin path. The creek behind the barn, once frozen silent, now ran quick and bright with meltwater. The air carried the scent of wet earth and pine, and the wildflowers returned not all at once, but in small, stubborn bursts. Jonah built a new fence along the west side of the pasture, not because it needed fixing, but because it felt good to make something that lasted. Elias watched him one morning, leaning against the porch rail with a cup of coffee in hand. "You gonna work yourself to death?" he asked. Jonah smirked. Figure I owed the land a little sweat. Elias chuckled. The land's grateful. But don't forget to rest now and then. Jonah did rest. For the first time in years, sleep came easy. He didn't wake in the middle of the night listening for boots outside his window or horses in the yard. The past still lived in him, but it didn't own him anymore. He'd kept a letter from the marshal, the official one, with all the stamps and legal language tucked in a drawer. It said the case was closed. No charges. No further contact. Clean slate. But Jonah hadn't needed the paper to know he was free. He'd felt it the moment he chose to stay. He rode into town twice a week now, picked up mail, traded supplies, stopped by the school to help Miss Lorna fix her roof or haul firewood. Folks greeted him by name. They knew who he was now, not because of the man who left him behind, but because of the man who raised him right. One afternoon, he passed the saloon. It looked smaller than he remembered, weathered and leaning, as if time had finally caught up with it. The same spot where someone once left him with nothing but a blanket and a name. He paused, then walked up to the porch, ran his hand along the old rail. Elias had never told him who left him there. Not for certain. Just said he found Jonah there one snowy night, all bundled up, with a note that read, "Please protect him. He's better than I ever was." And maybe that's all Jonah needed to know. He walked inside, ordered one drink, sat at a corner table where the light streamed in warm across the floorboards. He wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding. He was a man with scars and stories. But more importantly, he was a man with a home. And when he returned to the cabin that evening, Elias was there on the porch, waiting with a smirk and 2 bowls of stew. "Good day in town?" Elias asked. Jonah nodded. "It's getting there." They sat together and ate, while the sky burned gold over the ridgeline. Later that night, Jonah brought out a small box. Inside was a badge, not his father's, his own. "Marshall sent this. After the paperwork cleared, he said I could apply if I wanted to." Elias looked at the badge, then back at Jonah. "You gonna take it?" Jonah thought for a moment, then closed the box. "Not yet. Maybe someday. But right now, I got fences to mend and horses to feed. That's enough." Elias nodded, like he understood something deeper than words. They sat there in silence, the way 2 people can when the quiet feels like comfort. And when Jonah finally turned in for the night, he paused at the door, looked out across the fields, the same fields that once felt like the edge of the world. Now they felt like the center of it. Some stories begin with abandonment, but they don't have to end that way. If this journey meant something to you, if it reminded you of home, healing, or someone who gave you a second chance, let us know in the comments. And if you've stayed with us through all 10 parts, we're grateful, because stories like this, they're best shared. Thank you for riding this trail with us.